Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I have had my own opinion on why corruption has become rampant, particularly in most of our African countries. I think there are three main reasons for it, in my view. One of them is that corruption is always seen as the victim of corruption is the public. Now, as we know, there is nobody really there who one could say who is the public and they can stand up. We know it refers to everybody. And as we know, everybody's business is nobody's business. And so, since there is no grave of the victim, the public, when corruption occurs, people look at it slightly differently. If something was to happen to somebody run over by a car, the victim will have a grave. The public does not have a grave. And so it is treated in a slightly different way. The second reason is that generally, to stamp out corruption, you need to have some power and authority yourself. And needless to say, that having power and authority gives you the opportunity to be corrupt. And so while you are fighting for power to be elected, for instance, you will go out to the public and condemn it, the strongest of languages, condemn corruption. And yet, the minute you get into office, you forget about it. Because now you've got the opportunity to loot. The third reason is that in Africa, millions of people live in abject poverty. And holding public office has become now the accepted escape route. If you can hold public office, the minute you get into that position, the number one priority is to loot as much as possible, as quickly as possible, because you may never get another chance. And so it has been very difficult to stamp out corruption. Professor Lumumba is one individual who has contributed to this debate on problems in Africa. And he has come up with an explanation of why some of our young people are as keen as mustard to get into power. Just listen to this.
Time when I believed naively, of course, that the next generation is a generation that will be slightly better than our generation. But I'm quite clear in my mind that holding all factors constant, the younger generation is, in my view, even more dangerous to Africa.
Oh dear.
Because they have learned from the older generation. Remember the age-old saying that when mother cow is chewing cud, baby cow, namely the calf, is watching very keenly. The next generation of Africans is waiting for the opportunity to be thieves. And a recent survey in Kenya demonstrated that over 40% of young people think that there is nothing wrong with corruption. The only thing that they think is wrong is to be arrested, and that the only thing that you must do is to avoid being arrested. And I'm quite certain that if a survey were to be conducted in Nigeria, many young Nigerians would love to be in the opportunity, in the situation where they can steal. So that people condemn corruption sometimes not because they hate it, but because they themselves don't have the opportunity to be corrupt.
I think that is profound. It is true, particularly when you listen to some of these individuals who will be calling for change of leadership, generational change, the emphasis on youth. It is the time for the youth to take over. I get concerned when those people fail to address the failures of that old generation. They just want to take over because it's their turn. It's the youth's turn to rule. You can't help but feel that this is somebody who just sees it as, yes, the old generation have failed to run Africa's economies. They've been corrupt, incompetent, etc. But they're not concerned about that. What they're concerned about is their turn. They are not promising that they're not going to repeat the same things. Corruption, they will stamp it out. No, they're not interested in promising that. They're only interested in emphasizing that it is their turn. And I think the nations should be weary of people like that. People should not be elected on the basis of their youth or tribe or race or gender, etc. Because if you elect somebody on that basis, particularly if that individual wants to be elected on that basis, then one wonders, is it because they have nothing to offer? The old generation have been corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical. Why don't you address those problems? Why don't you come and say, vote for me, because this is how I'm going to deal with corruption. This is how I'm going to stamp it out. This is how I'm going to stop mismanagement. This is how I'm going to recover some of the stolen wealth. Because you don't want, they're not interested in that. All they're interested in, you think it is your turn. I think nations should be aware of that. When you go into power with a view that it is your turn, God help us. I think this is basically the attitude that Mnangagwa had. It was his turn. He never promised really to stamp out corruption or said anything significant. How are you going to stamp it out? Other than the usual promise, oh, we'll have zero tolerance on corruption. There will be no mismanagement and so forth. How? They've been with Mugabe for the last 37 years. Why didn't you implement some of those policies? You were a senior member of that party. He wasn't interested in stamping out corruption. And he did. It's no surprise that he's failed to stamp out corruption. Because, like I said, Once you get into power, you've got the opportunity to be corrupt. And those in power are the godfathers of corruption. They're not interested in stabbing it out. They're looting as much as they can, as quick as they can. We have got to stop this cycle of people removing leaders from positions of power and authority and cross our fingers that they will not be as corrupt, as incompetent as those we have removed. Let's ask them now before we elect them. What is it different you are going to do? It's not enough to say these people are corrupt, incompetent, and so forth. How are you going to be different? Food for thought. Thank you very much and have a good day.